Rolling blackouts expected. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins. He's on the other side of the camera, of course. He is our producer. This podcast is called Rolling Blackouts Expected. And we have the dumbest bill in America, and it is really dumb. This is Mark Fisher, and first up, rolling blackouts. You would think that would be in some third world country. Nope. You would think it would be, I don't know, in North Korea or maybe in some banana republic. That's what you would think. No, rolling blackouts are going to be here in the United States of America. And this is not in some like fringe publication, ladies and gentlemen. Wall Street Journal. In the Wall Street Journal yesterday, electricity shortage warnings grow across the United States. Power grid operators caution that electricity supplies aren't keeping up with demand amid the transition to cleaner forms of energy. I'm sure you can already figure out where this is going. From California to Texas to Indiana, electric grid operators are warning that power generating capacity is struggling to keep up with demand, a gap that could lead to rolling blackouts during heat waves or other peak periods as soon as this year. California's grid operator said Friday that it anticipates a shortfall in supplies this summer, especially if extreme heat, wildfires, or delays in bringing new power sources online exacerbate the constraints. The Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, or MISO, which oversees a large regional grid spanning much of the Midwest, said late last month that capacity shortages may force it to make emergency measures to meet summer demand and flagged the risk of outages. In Texas, where a number of power plants lately went offline for maintenance, the grid operator warned of tight conditions during a heat wave, expected to last into next week. The risk of electricity shortages is rising across the United States as traditional power plants are being retired. That's being nice. They're being shut down intentionally by policy more quickly than they can be replaced by renewable energy and battery storage. Power grids are feeling the strain as the United States makes a historic transition from conventional power plants fueled by coal and natural gas to cleaner forms of energy such as wind and solar. And aging nuclear power plants are slated for retirement in many parts of the country, which I might add that Democrats hate nuclear power, so they want those power plants, which are the cleanest form of baseload power, to close as well. The challenge is that wind and solar farms, which are among the cheapest forms of power generation, don't produce electricity at times when they're needed. And you need large batteries to store their output for later use. So I think this is interesting. This is the Wall Street Journal saying, the challenge is that wind and solar farms, which are among the cheapest forms of power generation, they are not amongst the cheapest form of power generation if you can't get power. I mean, how is that cheaper? While a large amount of battery storage is under development, regional grid operators have lately warned that the pace may not be fast enough to offset the closures of traditional power plants that can work around the clock. Yeah, you think? Speeding the build-out of renewable energy and batteries has become an especially difficult proposition amid supply chain challenges and inflation. Most recently, a probe by the Commerce Department into whether Chinese solar manufacturers are circumventing trade tariffs on solar panels has halted imports of key components needed to build them. And it's really brought the solar industry to a standstill. So, look, you see where I'm going with this? Where I'm going with this is that as a result of policy, Democrat policy, that shuts down coal plants, shuts down oil generation plants that generate electricity as a result of burning oil, Same thing for natural gas generation plants. And the left hates nuclear, so as nuclear power plants are aging, the left wants those to shut down rather than to build new modern versions of nuclear power plants. The left hates those as well. And they want to replace all of that baseload energy, which is the energy that you rely on, baseload, meaning it's so reliable that when you turn on the switch, you know the electricity is going to work, with non-baseload energy, which is solar and wind, which doesn't work when it's not windy and doesn't work when it's not sunny. So therefore, you need massive amounts of battery power and battery storage to back up all of that energy. And then you call it up when you need it, because naturally, if you don't store the power and it is not sunny and it is not windy, well, then you don't have power. That's why we're going to have the rolling blackouts, because we're retiring the traditional forms of generating electricity, and we're pushing our country into a third world status. By we, the Democrats, are pushing our country into a third world status. Let me give you an example, podcast listeners, of what the left does. In the region where I live in the United States of America, which is Southern Maryland, okay, there is a 100 plus acre forest that is being cut down as we speak, mowed down with bulldozers, completely cleared, a forest, okay, being mowed down, and in its place is going to be, solar panels. That's right. Wall-to-wall solar panels, a solar farm where there once was a forest, because somehow that makes sense. Trees and plants sequester carbon. So you're going to cut them down and put solar panels in their place? Yeah, that's what they did. And that's what they're doing as we speak. And Georgetown University, which is in Washington, D.C., which is quite a distance away, hour and 20 minutes away from this particular solar farm that's under construction, is going to actually buy the power. So Georgetown University, we've kind of talked about this before, except it's actually happening right now. Georgetown University is like, oh yeah, we're so woke, we're buying like only green energy. The green energy that goes in the grid, like that green energy from solar. And meanwhile, the idiots from Georgetown University, the so-called academics, are using their tuition money and money from the Archdiocese of Washington, because Georgetown University is a Catholic university. You'd never know it, though. That's for sure, because they don't comport themselves like Catholics. They're buying this solar energy exclusively. And the point is that means they are technically heavily subsidizing this solar plant, which is knocking down a 100-acre forest to put solar panels on it. This is what the left is doing. It's so incredibly stupid, okay? And the other thing that people don't understand when you build these utility-scale solar farms is that once they're built, you now have to build a grid from that solar farm to the main grid so that it can carry the electricity to where it needs to go. So, as you probably have figured out, most of these large solar farms and wind farms are installed and built in rural areas. Why? Because that's where the land is. And you need a lot of land to put those, to make them utility scale, if you will. Once they're built, guess what you need next? Now you need high tension power lines, right? You need the lines that take the electricity onto the main grid. So since you're in the middle of the country, you don't have those do you have electricity lines? Yes, you do. But they're built for distribution of power to places. They're not built for power generation from where you've built the solar and wind to the cities, which is where you want to send it. So in other words, you have to build, the point here is you have to build all new power lines as well, which means you have to cut down major amounts of forests when you build the power lines. Now, granted, we've talked about this before. The difference is, did you ever think you'd live in a country where you would have, ladies and gentlemen, rolling blackouts? This is your Democrat Party. And oh, by the way, your electricity bills are going way up because who do you think's got a pay for all of those new renewable energy plants when you're closing the traditional power plants? You are, of course. So your electricity is less reliable and it costs more. Way to go, Democrats. Good job, idiots. So in addition to that, if you think that wasn't bad enough, Biden cancels more oil and gas leases as fuel prices skyrocket. By the way, just came off of the newsreels a few minutes ago. The Biden administration canceled all 3 remaining offshore oil and gas lease sales last Wednesday, which was yesterday, as gasoline prices hit at an all-time high, as reported in the Daily Caller. The Department of the Interior, which oversees all lease sales on federal lands and waters, said a sale spanning 1.09 million acres in the Cook Inlet in Alaska was canceled due to a lack of industry interest, while 2 in the Gulf of Mexico were canceled due to factors including conflicting court rulings. In a statement Thursday to the Daily Caller News Foundation, with the cancellations, there are no more federal offshore oil and gas lease sales scheduled. So in other words, there's no chance of adding any new capacity into the American system. So you can expect even higher gas prices and higher oil prices. Way to go, Joe Biden. Way to go, Democrats. So now you have higher utility bills, less reliable electricity for your house, even though you're paying more, and you're paying more for the gasoline that you're putting in your car. And of course, if you drive a Tesla, since there's going to be a massive demand, and already is a massive demand, for lithium batteries, not just for Teslas, but for the grid, because you have to back up all that electricity. Now those are going to go sky high as well. So it's going to be only the rich who can afford electricity or afford cars, which is exactly what the left wants. Because the left was, I don't know, they kind of become the party of the rich, don't you think? I mean, they're the party of the rich. And Biden's climate czar may even have inadvertently revealed the deep dysfunction in the administration. So top White House climate advisor Gina McCarthy copied a CBS News reporter on an email chain Wednesday announcing the administration would cancel a series of oil and gas leases. The Cook Inlet sale was canceled. It is not proceeding, McCarthy wrote to other White House officials in an email CBS reported. That's because they were copied on the email. Another official reportedly responded immediately saying that a decision hadn't been made yet. Interior Department DOI officials then reiterated that sentiment to CBS, also saying the agency hadn't decided if it was forward on the lease sales or if it would move forward on the lease sales Wednesday evening. It's unclear why CBS News reporter was copied on the email, but the ensuing thread appeared to show disagreement and miscommunication over the administration's energy policies as gasoline prices continue to hit all-time highs. So as you can imagine, what's happening in the Biden administration, ladies and gentlemen, is you have 2 groups who are advising Biden within his administration. Group 1, the ideologues. Oh, we don't care what it does to people when prices go up. We don't care. We don't care what prices of energy does to food. We don't care because we're climate zombies. Those are the ideologues. An ideologue is a climate zombie. They don't care how much you hurt people and whether you bring your country from a first world status into a third world status. They don't care. And then you have the other side that's advising Biden, and those are more like the pragmatists, which are like, hey, dude, you're going to wipe us out. The Democrat Party, that is. You're going to wipe out the Democrat Party if you do not find a way to actually go ahead and get rid of the ideologues and move forward and allow folks to explore and find more energy and produce more energy for the American people so that we have sufficient energy and so that we are also self-sufficient with energy. So those are the 2 groups that occur and that exist now in the Biden administration. And now the arguments are starting to come to the forefront. And that's because the Democrats are freaking out, of course. And you finally have people speaking up. And it doesn't matter because Biden, of course, is out to lunch. You know, he's in la-la land. You know, it's like, that's okay. I'm sorry. It costs so much for oil and gas. I guess I'll just blame Trump and go to my multi-million-dollar mansion in Delaware in Bethany Beach, which is so classic. So the takeaway here is this. Rolling blackouts can only happen when you have complete and utter incompetence in the White House and complete and utter incompetence in the certain states where it's going to happen. And that is a fact. And by the way, apparently it includes Texas, where lots of people made a lot of money in the renewable business, and they realized there is insufficient actual traditional electricity generation to make up for the fact that they're going to be discontinued, and in their place you're going to have, of course, solar and wind. Lots of people made a lot of money from this, and it's not just Democrats, by the way. It's Republicans, too, who've gotten into this renewable space. And it, by the way, is a scam. It's a scam. Believe me, I've talked about this tons of times. And here's another example. If it weren't a scam, then why on earth would we be having rolling blackouts? Really, folks. So next up, podcast listeners, Biden's czarina of disinfo. So Biden's czarina of disinformation, the so-called Ministry of Truth, her name is Nina Jankowicz, okay? She was wallowing in authoritarian power, that her role, and that she has been empowered to proclaim that she wants people verified, and not just that they're verified Twitter users and not bots, but also that what they say is verified, and that the government should have the right to verify what is written and said on Twitter. Can't make this stuff up. Look, this is some serious stuff. We're going to talk about this in a minute. We have a clip. It's in her own words. This is brand new. You've heard other stuff that she said. This one's brand new. We have the clip, and here it is.
And I am eligible for it because I'm verified. But there are a lot of people who shouldn't be verified, who aren't, legit, in my opinion. I mean, they are real people, but they're not trustworthy. Anyway, so verified people can essentially start to edit Twitter the same sort of way that Wikipedia is, so they can add context to certain tweets. So just as a easy example, not from any political standpoint, if President Trump were still on Twitter and tweeted a claim about voter fraud, someone could add context from one of the 60 lawsuits that went through the court, or something that an election official in one of the states said, perhaps your own Secretary of State and his news conferences, something like that. Adding context so that people have a fuller picture rather than just an individual claim on a tweet.
That's the czarina, Nina Jankowicz, saying that I should be verified, but, you shouldn't be verified. It's kind of like essential versus non-essential. The government's essential, but you're not essential, like classic Marxism. And then at the very end, what does she say? She says that, well, when someone tweets that, we should have the right, the government should have the right to add context to what you tweeted so that, people understand really what you're trying to say, or what's right or what is wrong. That's the role of government. And then she says, as an example, from no political standpoint, if Donald Trump tweeted something out, from no political standpoint, then goes right, segues into, well, let me talk about Donald Trump, who, of course, isn't even on Twitter, which shows you what a moron she is, because they canceled Donald Trump on Twitter. So the takeaway from that conversation, ladies and gentlemen, is, and by the way, it was a Zoom call, and she's on the Zoom call with other like-minded morons and ideologues, and you should see them. They're all like really smiling, and they're like really happy. Oh yeah, that's right. I can't wait to add context to those bad people who tweet things out that I disagree with. It'll be so much fun. Once again, folks, Nina Jankowicz just said in her own words that when you, John Smith USA, tweets something out on your account, that Nina Jankowicz has the right, as a government agent, the Stasi, to go and add context to your free speech rights. She has the right to do that. Unbelievable. I've never in my life heard of anything even remotely close to this. Just not even close. It's so incredibly scary. And in this article, they call her drunk with power. And I'm just calling her like Tsarina because I'm not really sure what else to call her. Also, Nina Jankowicz, the same person, the Tsarina, she says Republicans exposing critical race theory are disinformers. And that's in the Epoch Times. So she thinks that part of disinformation is if you talk about, at a school board, as an example, that you oppose critical race theory, and then you define what critical race theory is, and then you decide to tweet that out. Let's say you decide to tweet out a video of you talking about this on Twitter, and then she's basically saying, yeah, I have the right, as a government agent using taxpayer money to add context to what you are writing on Twitter. I mean, this is so scary. Chris, isn't this ridiculous? I mean, can you believe? What would you do if they added context to like some of your stuff that you put out there? Not that you put out crazy stuff, or not crazy, it's not even the word, but not that you put out like political stuff, because you don't.
It just feels like an infringement on my right to say what I want to say.
Yeah, it's like it's not Mark Fisher or some other friend that's out there that's contradicting you or debating you on Twitter. It's the government debating you on Twitter and saying, hey, the government fact checkers, the Tsarina has issued an edict that what you said is not so.
If you want to see where this could go wrong, just go read 1984.
Yeah, it's right. It's literally right down 1984. I mean, look, I have said this before, and it segues me into this next segment. The left is mentally ill. I really believe that the left has become mentally ill. And it takes a lot to say this, but look at the stuff that they're doing. I mean, they're mentally ill. I mean, even our dumbest bill in America, which we'll get to later in this podcast, demonstrates the left is mentally ill. Case in point, MSNBC panelist wants to have sex with one of the Supreme Court leakers. I guess it's one person, maybe it's multiple people that leaked the Roe v. Wade draft. And then she wants to abort the baby. So the left's bizarre and disgusting perversion was on complete display on MSNBC with a guest comedian. Oh, yeah, because that's, when you're going to talk about serious matters like abortion, you bring on a comedian. Stating that she would like to have sex with the leaker of the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade and then abort the child. Yeah. So shock comedian Laurie Kilmartin said this on Saturday on a panel led by host Amyan Mo Yildiz. I guess that's how you say his name, on MSNBC. You ever notice on MSNBC, everybody that's on there, it's like, God forbid if you have anybody that's Caucasian on MSNBC, and it's fine that they have diversity, of course, but that in their mind at MSNBC, you will not get hired if you're a white dude. I mean, it's just really pretty clear. I mean, it's obvious. But nonetheless, this comedian, ladies and gentlemen, is on a panel and they're talking about this issue, right? And it's a serious issue. And it's a serious issue because across blue states in America, there are late-term abortions that are performed all the time for any reason and for no reason. That is a fact. I can tell you it does happen in my state, and the children that are being aborted are perfectly healthy. All right? And by that, I mean literally not a thing wrong with the child, but because the mother has claimed that the mother herself would receive or have mental anguish as a result of giving birth to the baby. In the state of Maryland, that is sufficient reason to abort the baby in the 9th month. That's a fact. And it's been happening in Maryland for a long time, and the state legislature codified that. Okay? This is happening in blue states across the country. And yet MSNBC, oh, this is all funny stuff because they can't actually talk about in any intelligent way the issue in a principled way. So anyway, look, we have this clip. I want you to listen to it. You can judge for yourself. Here's the clip.
Yeah, so I mean, here's the thing. Here's my feeling about the leaker. I would like to find out who the leaker is so I could make sweet love to that person because that person is a hero to me. Okay? And if the leaker, a lot of people are saying it could be a conservative. If the leaker is a Republican, and if I get pregnant during our lovemaking, I will joyfully abort our fetus and let them know. I don't know if that answered your question. I probably didn't.
It was a little off topic. It was a little. Go ahead,
Okay.
Jen. Take this one.
I mean, you know, it's all rumor right now, right?
So that's supposed to be funny. When you watch MSNBC, you know, this is what they consider to be funny. Folks, this is why I say the left is mentally ill. They're mentally ill because in the real world, as I just said before, it is indeed happening today. And by the way, if Roe v. Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court, you know what happens in my state? The same thing tomorrow and the same thing today and yesterday, it'll occur. That is to say, nothing will change. You in the state where I am from, where I'm a state legislator, you can, if you're a mom, abort your child in the 9th month simply by saying, giving birth to this baby is going to cause me the mother harm, even though the doctors confirm that the baby is perfectly healthy in every way. That is allowed today. And if Roe v. Wade is overturned, it will still be allowed. And I will tell you, it's disgusting. It is murder. It's what I believe. I believe that all life matters. But unfortunately, when you watch MSNBC and you see this stuff, you have to say to yourself, do they really understand even what they're saying? Do they really understand the consequences of their actions? I don't think these individuals know. Some of them. I think some do and some don't. I think some of them really don't know that late-term abortions are indeed occurring of perfectly healthy children. And it's just disgusting. It really is. So Mattel, according to the Babylon Bee, of course, this is a spoof. Mattel unveils a new pregnant Ken doll. Once again, the left does believe that you can get pregnant. Certainly Pete Buttigieg does, because he had twins, or his husband had twins. The left does believe this. So, you know, making fun of the left is really what we ought to do to demonstrate and illustrate how incredibly mentally ill they are. In the Babylon Bee, Mattel unveils new pregnant Ken doll, and there's Barbie holding Ken's stomach. You know, both of her hands are underneath Ken's very pregnant stomach. And Ken just looks like really concerned, you know, and Barbie's like, oh, hang in there, honey. You only got 1 month left. El Segundo, California. This morning, Mattel announced the launch of a new Barbie-themed toy, a pregnant Ken doll. The move has been hailed as an exciting step forward for trans inclusion. Quote, everyone needs to see themselves in their toys, said Mattel executive Andrew Shue. For too long, pregnant boys have been excluded. Today, this finally changes. We are pleased to announce the summer rollout of Pregnant Ken. According to reports, the gathered press pool in front of Mattel's headquarters applauded and whooped for several minutes at Shue's announcement, after which he was able to resume speaking. All kinds of kids, quote, need toys for self-expression. Small kids and big kids, sweet kids and nasty kids, poor kids and white kids, as our president says. So it just goes on and on. Funny stuff. Obviously, Babylon Bee, good stuff. And who knows, maybe Mattel will eventually do this. Anything's possible these days based on what we're seeing the left do. So, next up, podcast listeners, we have the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. That's right, we have the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. And you're going to love this one. It's about inflation. Yes, it's about inflation. In the Daily Caller, President Joe Biden said, inflation was both a strength and a threat in an apparent gaffe Tuesday during a speech during which he was discussing his plans for tackling inflation and lowering costs. And Biden was talking about this, and you can just tell this guy is getting crazier. I don't know. Maybe that's not the right word. What is it?
Senile?
Senile. Yes, senile. Losing his mind. Just disconnected from the job he's supposed to be doing. And I think it's in large part because of his age. Of course, I do believe that. I think it's very clear. Any reasonably intelligent person would look at this. But the left, of course, as I've said, I do believe they are mentally ill. They are looking at Joe Biden and going, oh, isn't he wonderful? So once again, if you're the president of the United States and your job is to get in front of America, convince them that you take inflation seriously, and therefore you're going to take the following actions because you want to fix this problem, would you say this? Would you really say this? We have the clip. Here it is.
And I agree with what Chairman Powell said last week, that the number one threat is the strength, and that strength that we built is inflation. So the Fed should...
The number one threat is the strength that we built, and that strength is inflation. Did he really say that? Come on. Are we clipping this and trying to... We don't do that, by the way, on Mark and the Millennials. I'm very proud of that. What we do is we literally play long clips so that you can hear it in context and then make up your mind. And this is really what he said. He's in front of a bunch of people talking about inflation. We got to play this again for you. Here's the clip.
And I agree with what Chairman Powell said last week, that the number one threat is the strength, and that strength that we built is inflation. So the Fed should...
The strength that we built is inflation. Doesn't get much better than that. Way to go, Joe Biden. And that's the Daily Biden Dumpster Fire. So next up, podcast listeners, on Mark and the Millennials, sometimes we talk about crony capitalism. Okay? Crony capitalism is when capitalism is so skewed and it's so crooked because politicians are providing special privileges for their friends through tax laws and or special advantages in funding through policy or special restrictions of your competitors through regulation. Okay, that's crony capitalism. And it happens all the time. By the way, it happens with Republicans and it happens with Democrats. But as you guys know out there in podcast land, there's nothing more important to the Democrats right now than their monopoly on the media and their monopoly on big tech. And as you've heard before, and you've heard again and again, with Elon Musk trying to buy Twitter, he's come to an agreement to buy Twitter, but remember, he hasn't written the check to close on the purchase of Twitter. That takes some time. The federal government is opening up an investigation into Elon Musk, a report says. This is in the Daily Wire. The United States government has reportedly opened an investigation into Elon Musk's business dealings surrounding his recent $44 billion purchase of Twitter. The Securities and Exchange Commission is probing Mr. Musk's tardy submission of a public form that investors must file when they buy more than 5% of a company's shares. The Wall Street Journal reported the disclosure functions as an early sign to shareholders and companies that a significant investor could seek control or influence of the company. That's the purpose of the filing. The report said that Musk's April 4th disclosure filing was at least 10 days late, a move that is believed to have saved him more than $140 million because share prices could have been higher if the public knew about his ownership of 5% of the company. The case is easy. It's straightforward, Daniel Taylor, a University of Pennsylvania accounting professor, said. But whether they're going to pick that battle with Elon is another question. Well, they obviously are. That's why they've opened an investigation. The report noted that a lawsuit against Musk from the SEC would likely not stop him from taking over Twitter, since the company's board of directors unanimously approved to be acquired by Musk anyway. And the SEC may lack the power to do it anyway, to go after him. I kind of doubt that. Musk's purchase of Twitter is also reportedly being reviewed by the Federal Trade Commission. So there you have it. You've got the federal government being weaponized by the Biden administration and engaging in full-blown crony capitalism, because in crony capitalism, only the right people can own the right companies. Okay? It's only the chosen people that can own those companies. Free thinkers, they can't own any kind of media properties. Free thinkers aren't allowed to own media. Come on. We can't allow that. That would be wrong, according to the Democrats. And that's what makes them mentally ill, because when you have a government that is so big now as the United States federal government, there's nothing it can't do. It can become weaponized overnight. And all a president of the United States has to do, since he appoints so many people across the cabinet, is to simply call his buddies up and say, hey, you know what I need you to do? I need you to, engage in a full-blown investigation of this guy. Or call up the FBI, and say, hey, look, I want you to find something on this guy, because we can't have him allowing people to say free things freely on Twitter. And of course, that's precisely why Obama, who's the real president of the United States, has Nina Jankowicz in the Homeland Security actually doing this whole Tsarina thing of misinformation and disinformation. She's the Tsarina of disinfo of the U.S. government. Why do you have her there? You have her there to be able to shake down people like Elon Musk. You have the SEC and the FTC to shake down Elon Musk. Notice you don't really hear about other people being shaken down by these agencies. You notice how that's interesting? Out of all of the tech companies, out of all the media companies, I don't know of any ongoing investigations that's going after someone simply because they're trying to bring a company public and buy the company for a premium, by the way. And the company was heading south big time. Twitter was, because they had alienated half of their users. But that's okay. Because according to the left, the very mentally ill left, as long as you alienate the correct users, that is what makes sense. That is what should be allowed. So crony capitalism, which does happen under Republicans and does happen under Democrats, it's made possible through policy and through the largesse of government. And it's got to stop. It has got to stop. We've got to take back government. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And don't we have a lead up, Mr. Producer?
Of course.
Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is the Menstrual Dignity Act. That's right. You heard that correctly. It's called the Menstrual Dignity Act, and it is out of the state of Oregon. House Bill 3294 in Oregon, and it's solving menstrual equity. Okay, so here is what is being said about the bill. You can believe it because we have read the bill. We'll read you parts of the policies, and we even have some of the testimony on the bill that you can listen to. You have to listen to this dumbest bill in America. The Menstrual Dignity Act, Oregon public schools to stock feminine products in boys' bathrooms. Feminine products, including tampons and pads, will be placed in all boys' restrooms at Oregon's public schools starting in the 2022 to 2023 school year to comply with the state's 2021 Menstrual Dignity Act, which is now law. The law requires that tampons and sanitary pads are available at no cost to students through dispensers located in all student bathrooms, including boys' rooms at elementary, middle, and high schools, and every other public school building in the state. So if you think for 1 minute that gender ideology and, gender identity politics are not being taught to kids in elementary school? Well, of course they are, because in Oregon, they're putting menstrual products in boys' rooms, boys' bathrooms. Currently, the law requires that tampon and pad dispensers are placed in at least 2 student bathrooms of every public school building. Student bathrooms in the legislation refers to girls' rooms, boys' rooms, and unisex bathrooms. The change goes into effect July 1, 2022. So just like a month and a half away. Portland Public Schools, PPS, announced in an April 17th release that it had begun preparing for the upcoming requirements. Here's what they said. Starting next year, products will be available in all restrooms, male, female, and all gender, in every PPS building where education occurs. To ensure timely compliance, PPS ordered 500 dispensers. Dispensers have been installed in all elementary and middle school girls' rooms and boys' rooms, and more will be installed in all remaining bathrooms, including, of course, the boys' restrooms, next year, which, by the way, means 2022 in July. Instructions for how to use tampons and pads will be posted in all bathrooms. So Chris, instructions on how to use these tampons and pads will be available to you in the boys' room. So I'm just wondering, what exactly will the instructions entail in the boys' rooms for the tampons and the pads?
Probably not anything that's applicable to me.
Yes. So that's House Bill 3294 in Oregon, folks. And we have 2 clips from the idiots who testified for the bill. Okay. One of them is Representative Ruiz. Representative Ruiz is a supporter of the bill, and he is an elected official in the state house in Oregon, in the state legislature, in Oregon. We have a clip from Representative Ruiz, who's testifying for House Bill 3294 in Oregon, the Menstrual Dignity Act. Listen to what he has to say. Here it is.
We requested the removal of gendered words such as female restrooms or feminine hygiene products, and have opted for inclusive language such as accessible student bathrooms, meaning a bathroom that is accessible by students who menstruate, including gender-neutral bathrooms. Not all females menstruate, and not all who are menstruators are females.
Not all females menstruate, and not all menstruators are females. So therefore, we're going to put this stuff in elementary schools because, we got so many people who are boys in elementary schools who are apparently menstruating. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's interesting. Chris and I were talking about this earlier. When I was in school, right, especially middle school and high school, the big thing then was when you went into the boys' room, what you would do is you would get an M80. So an M80, of course, is like a firecracker times like 100. And of course, they were illegal to buy, but you could buy them across state lines. And there was always that kid who had like 20 of them because his dad went across and he convinced his dad to go across the line in Pennsylvania, from Maryland to Pennsylvania, to bring them back. And so the dad would bring them back, and the dad would always say, whatever you do, you cannot light any of these off without me present, because these are very dangerous. By the way, they will blow off your hand or a finger. Because they're extremely powerful. So, naturally that's what but as a boy, like, you're really going to listen to that? So those kids would always bring a couple of those, knowing that since their dad bought like 50 or 75 of them, that he wouldn't miss 1 or 2. They'd bring them to the high school. They'd go into the boys' bathroom. They'd light it, and it had a wax trigger, and the trigger was like 45-second delay or so. It took a while, but because it was wax, it would stay lit when it was in water. So they would light it, put it in the toilet, flush the toilet, and then very quickly exit the bathroom, as you can imagine, like really quickly without it being totally obvious that you were like running because you just did something. Because naturally there'd always be some teacher in the hallway. So you just walk out like la, 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 la. And then when the M80 blew up, it would always blow up, of course, in some other part of the school. So they could never trace it to the bathroom. And the next thing you know, in biology class, there was water coming through the roof, into the biology class. So, that's no kidding. That's what we did in the boys' room, okay? But the Democrats, no, the Democrats want the boys to basically use tampons in the boys' room because they are mentally ill. So here's Manju Bangalore. Manju Bangalore, she is not a representative in Oregon. She is a person who wants period poverty and also end period poverty. And she testified for HB 3294. We have the clip of her testifying for this bill, and here it is.
As many of you know, period poverty, or the lack of access to menstrual products, is very real. This bill providing menstrual products in all public schools and universities in women's and gender-neutral restrooms is a step closer to menstrual equity. However, the words female and feminine hygiene products in the bill exclude people who menstruate who do not identify as women or females. This must be replaced with menstruator and menstrual products to include trans men and non-binary or gender non-conforming people who bleed. In addition, I believe this bill should go beyond its current state and truly fight for all people who menstruate by including a provision requiring menstrual product dispensers in all restrooms, not just the women's and gender-neutral ones. Given that in 2021, there's a massive slate of transphobic bills in other state legislatures, now is the time for Oregon to stand tall in the face of hate and protect all trans students. If menstrual product dispensers are not in all of the restrooms, trans men may have to choose between their identity and access to menstrual products, putting them at further risk of harassment and violence.
So I just have to say this. Non-binary and people who bleed. So in other words, Ms. Bangalore is saying in her testimony in front of the legislature for House Bill 3294, the Menstrual Dignity Act, that if you are non-binary, then you bleed or may bleed. Or, that if you were transgender. So look, folks, this is utter nonsense. It is utter nonsense. And it demonstrates to me why the left is mentally ill. And here's the thing. In the Oregon Department of Education, okay, the Department of Education of Oregon, they have a menstrual dignity toolkit for students. And it's part of their policies. So in other words, some idiot paid somebody to write a policy for the Oregon Department of Education that they're distributing called the Menstrual Dignity for Students Toolkit. And here I'm reading right from it. Centering student equity and access. 4 pillars of menstrual dignity. In line with this legislation and legislative intent, the following 4 pillars of menstrual dignity and guide and inform this toolkit and work. So here are the 4 pillars: privacy, inclusivity, access, and education. So privacy, space, autonomy, personal safety. Inclusivity, cultural responsiveness, gender affirming. Access, for all students of all abilities. What do you mean, all students of all abilities? For multilingual access. For options and choice. Options and choice. Education. Menstrual health, use of menstrual products, positive, not fear or shame-based. So I know this is probably going to upset some people out there in podcast land about the so-called Menstrual Dignity Act in Oregon, but what's wrong with taking personal responsibility? And I know that when you're young and you're in middle school and your body's changing and so forth, that things happen that are unexpected, okay? Or that you don't have a mother in your life, or you have a mother in your life that doesn't provide you information. Okay, fine. These things happen. But my God, really? Boys' rooms? Right? Instead of trying to solve a problem, they're creating a whole new problem, which is, hey guys, instead of putting M80s in the toilet, make sure you use those menstrual products in the boys' room. And that's the dumbest bill in America, the Menstrual Dignity Act, HB 3294 in Oregon, solving menstrual equity. And that's it for Mark the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.